Welcome to CBJ and 30 Trade Deadline, presented by Ruoff Mortgage. I'm Bob McElligott alongside of Dylan Tyrer, and the Jackets insider, Jeff Svoboda, is with us here today as we're down to the final hour of the NHL Trade Deadline. Now, guys, of course, the final hour means that's the way it is on paper. But there are things that can be done on paper or at least registered with the league by 3 o'clock this afternoon that have to go through a process. So even though the deadline is at 3 o'clock, there could be some deals that spill over until 3:30, 3:45. We've seen this happen before, Dylan. Not saying that it will happen today, but just to lay it out there and let you know how it exactly works.
Right, we saw it just last year with Max Domi. Everything was coming down to the wire for the Columbus Blue Jackets last season. Max Domi dealt at, $259, and we heard about it a little bit after that. Aiden Hershuk coming back, a prospect from the Carolina Hurricanes. But Yarmo Kekalainen made it very clear in his media availability a couple days ago that the Blue Jackets wanted to get business done ahead of time this year to avoid a situation like that, and I think the rest of the National Hockey League has certainly followed suit for a number of reasons, right?
Absolutely. And, Jeff, look back at these last couple of weeks. Brock Besser was the first guy to go, really, when he went from the Vancouver Canucks to the New York Islanders. And ever since then, it's been crazy. I think since last Friday, there have been just under 50 deals that have been done now, if you count what's gone on today. It's absolutely ridiculous. A trade deadline like we really have not seen in the National Hockey League.
It feels a little bit almost NBA-esque as far as the player movement. And we've seen over the years how that has become such a fun part of the NBA. Now the NHL seems to have embraced it. I don't know what maybe changed this year, but we've seen moves on top of moves on top of moves up to this point. It's been really interesting to see teams in the East really loading up. Boston has had a historic season up to this point, but there's, a three-time defending Eastern Conference champion there in Tampa Bay, a Toronto team that feels like it's their time, young Rangers and Devils teams loading up, and so there's been a lot of excitement on that end of it. The Blue Jackets being a part of it with a couple trades that ended up going to the Western Conference, where teams there probably feel like there's maybe a chance with Colorado not quite being the same team this year. So whatever it is, there's something in the water. These teams feel like they're maybe one deal away from making that championship run, and as they say, flags fly forever. So you've got to put everything you have in that bucket to make it happen.
Arms race in the Eastern Conference, absolute arms race going on, and part of that is because Toronto and Tampa know that they're going to face each other in the first round of the playoffs, and the Toronto Maple Leafs especially very desperate to get through that. We'll talk about all of that stuff here in just a minute, but let's start with what the Blue Jackets have done. We knew going into this trade deadline, we knew all year that there were three players that were going to be unrestricted free agents at the end of the season that the Blue Jackets would probably be looking to deal. Gus Nyquist, Jonas Korpisalo, and Vladislav Gavrikov, and they all have been traded away. It started with Gus Nyquist, and this one was the most interesting because Gus is injured, and he's not playing right now. But yet the Blue Jackets were able to acquire a fifth-round pick from the Minnesota Wild to get Gus Nyquist. Their hopes is that he will be able to play come playoff time, and if he is, it'll be a great addition to the Minnesota Wild. But just to get something for him, I feel is that's a win for Yarmo Kekalainen.
I agree 100%. I think the Blue Jackets really did well at this trade deadline. We'll obviously see if something happens here going forward, but Gus Nyquist, he's a very valuable player for the Blue Jackets, right? A Swiss Army knife, a solid two-way player. He does everything. He started killing penalties with the Columbus Blue Jackets, too, and I was looking at Michael Russo's kind of write-up of what the Minnesota Wild were getting in Gus Nyquist, and that was one of the first things that he mentioned, that they're getting a penalty killer and a guy who can play on the power play, and that's something that he really added to his toolkit here with the Blue Jackets under John Tortorella first, at least killing those penalties. So I thought that was really, really interesting. But again, he's a guy that's injured right now, hasn't played in a while for the Blue Jackets, and the hope is, and he made it very, very clear right when he was hurt, that he could come back potentially for the end of the regular season, and if not the end of the regular season, then the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think what Bill Guerin's been able to do in Minnesota has been really, really shrewd. A couple of nice low-key acquisitions there, some veteran guys that can add that scoring punch, because if you look at the top of their lineup, they have young stars, right? A guy like Matt Boldy is a young budding star in the National Hockey League. Kirill Kaprizov, I suppose you could still call a young star. He's a little bit older, but he's young in his NHL career, and he is a true superstar in the National Hockey League. The Blue Jackets saw that just this last weekend. But you add some of this secondary scoring to what Minnesota's doing, and I really like what they've put together. For a team in the West to have a chance, I said this about Minnesota last year when they kind of loaded up at the deadline. I liked their odds last year based off of kind of the way that their roster is constructed. Bill Guerin was that guy in the NHL that he had punch to his game, but he could also add some skill, and I think his team reflects that as well. There are a lot of hard two-way players on that team, And Gus Nyquist is just kind of an extension of that, I think, and some of the other guys that they were able to add as well are extensions of that. So I like the Minnesota Wild out of the West and what they were able to do. But going back to what you initially talked about, I love that the Blue Jackets were able to get anything for Gus Nyquist, right? Because when he gets hurt, you're like, oh man, what's going to happen here? But they get draft capital, and the way it looks right now, it's the Boston Bruins 5th round draft pick, right? So it might as well be the first pick in the 6th round as things stand. And look what the Blue Jackets drafted in the 6th round a few years ago. Vladislav Gavrikov, who they just flipped to the LA Kings for a first-round pick, obviously with some other pieces there included. But the Blue Jackets have really been able to, find some gems in later rounds. So those are all lottery tickets, right? And you get as many as you can.
When he got hurt, Jeff, I thought this is going to be a 7th round. You're going to be lucky to get a 7th round pick out of this. You're going to take whatever the heck that you can get. Yeah. And then you start reading some things. You think, oh, maybe it'll be better than that. And then the NHL comes out just a couple of days ago in the morning with the, saying they're going to be watching very closely when you're trading injured players to other teams. I don't know if that pushes it down. I doubt it. Again, I'm expecting a 7th. They got a 5th. I'll take it as a win.
Yeah, I would say so. And General Manager Yarmo Kekalainen said that may have been a factor when it came to what they were able to get in return for Gus Nyquist. And, it's one of those situations where that was so spooky to the Blue Jackets that Vladislav Gavrikov then didn't play for 2 weeks afterward because you saw what that did to a trade asset for Columbus. And so, that NHL thing did come out, but at the same time, it's pretty clear Gus Nyquist is not a Nikita Kucherov situation, a Patrick Kane situation. We've seen teams that have won the Stanley Cup because they were able to manipulate LTIR. This was a guy who was legitimately injured late in the season. The Blue Jackets made it very clear, though, that there was a pretty good chance he'd be back in time to help a team in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And so to get anything from that, it's unfortunate you get in these situations where your sellers and players that, fans had really become fond of and enjoyed watching play the Gusses and the Gavrikovs and the Korpisalos. But you get in these situations, you have to maximize those assets, and that's what we saw the Blue Jackets do here.
The Gavrikov situation looked like it might be a very dangerous situation because it was heavily rumored, that he was going to go to the Boston Bruins for a 1st and a 3rd round pick from the Bruins. The Bruins, they just had to move out a little bit of salary first, and then we'll get back to you on that. What they ended up doing is making a trade with the Washington Capitals to get Dmitry Orlov instead. And the fact that Yarmo was able to take Jonas Korpisalo and Vladislav Gavrikov, package them together, and send them to L.A., and get that 1st round pick as part of the return deal. It was great. L.A. needed those things. The Blue Jackets needed to get rid of these 2 players. They took Jonathan Quick in that deal. We'll talk about that in a second. And that's to help out the L.A. Kings. And, Jeff, that's really what it's about here, right? I mean, it's about, you've got to do certain things, but there are times if you have the space, you've got to help the other team, and that's what they did with L.A.
Well, it's so funny. You've got the salary cap, and there's so many things you can do to manipulate it. Obviously, the big things have to happen, but we see teams, when you're able to trade, take on salary in some of these deals, we're able to use LTIR in some of these situations. It's just so funny how many of the different things you can do to make these deals get done. And this is another one of those situations where, it wasn't quite a 3-team trade, which we saw last year in that Max Domi deal that you referenced, but you still basically kind of serve as a broker in some ways that get Jonathan Quick somewhere. And so it just... These GMs are endlessly creative. There's always something they can come up with to make these things happen. And at the end of the day, it's good that they did that because the Gavrikovs and Korpisalos of the world now get to chase a Stanley Cup, which is something that obviously any hockey player wants to be able to have a chance to win in their careers. The Blue Jackets get back some assets, and the big thing to me, and I think you agree with this, Dylan, they had to get a 1st round pick somewhere along these deals. You had these contracts expiring, but you had to get a 1st rounder in what's going to be a really good draft. And the Blue Jackets were able to accomplish that.
I think it's really impressive, the 1st round pick that they were able to acquire. Obviously, it's conditional at the moment, but it looks like the LA Kings are going to make the playoffs, right? The condition on that 1st round pick from Los Angeles is if the Kings make the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Blue Jackets get their 1st round draft pick. If the Kings somehow miss the Stanley Cup playoffs, it becomes their 2nd round draft pick in 2023 and then another 2nd round draft pick in 2024. But you're absolutely right. You had to get a 1st round pick because that was the ask for Vladislav Gavrikov all along. But then you see some of these other defensemen become available, a guy like Dmitry Orlov, or even some of these other surprises on defense that we've seen get dealt. The Philip Hroneks, the players like that, and you're like, wait a second, are the Blue Jackets going to be able to pry a 1st round pick away from one of these teams, or a Matthias Ekholm?
Was not a seller's market, was it?
No, exactly. And the Blue Jackets were able to make something happen. And all due respect to the LA Kings and Vladislav Gavrikov and Jonas Korpisalo, but you look at some of the other teams in the Western Conference right now, and you're like, it's obviously a gauntlet in the East. I think the East is so much stronger than the West, but it's still a gauntlet in a sense in the West, in that you look at the LA Kings, and that could be a pretty lucrative first-round pick when it comes down to it.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that one works out. But I talked about Jonathan Quick. He's part of this deal, and apparently the big problem was he didn't know it. Nobody told him that this could happen. 37 years old, finishing off a 10-year contract with the Los Angeles Kings, not happy about it, the way it all comes out. You know, it's social media today. You can't hide anything. Players get done with a game. They win the game. They go in the dressing room. They find their goalies traded, a guy that helped them win a couple of Stanley Cups. And, you know, it wasn't – I was going to say it wasn't that he wasn't going to come here. I guess maybe it was.
We did get one of the great viral moments from the trade deadline out of it, though.
That's a good point.
The Jonathan Quick thank you graphic the Blue Jackets put out.
Yeah, it was a quick relationship for sure. But
was that a pun intended there?
Yeah, of course it was. But they flip him to the Vegas Golden Knights, and this works out perfectly. Again, I was talking about helping other teams out. I mean, look, L.A. is not taking this guy and sending him to Vegas. They're not doing it because they can play each other in the playoffs. Okay, if you can find that third party that's able to come in there, take a little bit of cash off the table, help you out that way, and then if he winds up in Vegas, he winds up in Vegas. As Jeff, as you know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So, Jonathan Quick is there, and the Blue Jackets able to get back Michael Hutchinson and a 2025 7th-round pick. Michael Hutchinson is here, by the way. He will back up Elvis Merzlikins tonight against the Seattle Kraken. He will back up Elvis for the remainder of the regular season. That's the plan. But we had a chance to talk to him briefly today and get to know him just a little bit. Guy that's happy to be here, guy that was playing in the American Hockey League, and now he gets a chance to come back to the NHL. So, again, this is another deal that when it first happens, I know a lot of you out there were all worried about, the guy doesn't want to come to Columbus. That had nothing to do with Columbus, had nothing to do with the Blue Jackets. It had to do with a guy that was a 10-year contract, a guy under a 10-year contract with the Los Angeles Kings, a couple of cups, thought maybe he could retire there, have a statue out in front, let's ride off into the sunset, and all of a sudden found out the sunset was going to be in Ohio, or now in Vegas. That's what the whole thing was about. But again, it works out, and that's what you're looking to do. Just make it work out.
The statue's still a possibility.
Oh, he's getting the statue. There's 100% chance he's getting the statue. There's no problem with that. The problem was nobody tipped him off.
No, this league is ruthless, right? And Jeff talked about it with the NBA earlier. It's fun, all the drama that comes at the trade deadline. You know, some people get mad about it, and it creates lifelong beef in that league. And I'm not saying that Jonathan Quick is going to have lifelong beef with the Los Angeles Kings. He might with Rob Blake, but everything's going to end okay for Jonathan Quick with the LA Kings. But look at the situation that we have right now. What if the Vegas Golden Knights and LA Kings match up in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and you've got Jonathan Quick starting for Vegas against all of his old buddies on LA? That's unbelievable storytelling.
And Jonas Korpisalo.
Vegas against all of his old buddies on LA. That's unbelievable storytelling.
And Jonas Korpisalo for the Kings. That would be ironic.
Yeah, it would. It really would. Wouldn't it be great if we had one of those patented Vladislav Gavrikov blocks a million shots? Maybe William Karlsson's the guy shooting the puck. Vladislav Gavrikov blocks a million shots, protecting Jonas Korpisalo, and then they go down the other way and score on Jonathan Quick. Blue Jackets, Kings, Vegas Golden Knights, a little love triangle.
Could happen. Yeah. It absolutely could happen. You mentioned Rob Blake. That is one thing that I am surprised about. Rob Blake he's a former player, and he was a great player. And he played for more than one franchise. And I don't know. I know agents can get involved, and they can, maybe let the cat out of the bag a little bit early here, too. That's the only part that surprised me about Quick seeming not to be tipped off, is he was, that Rob Blake, that it happened on his watch. I'm not saying he did it on purpose. I'm just saying that it happened on his watch.
It seems like there's got to be a better way to communicate these things, right? And I remember we were talking to Nick Blankenberg in the locker room about the Gus Nyquist trade after the Buffalo game, and he had no idea. So I guess players get so locked into their routines they can.
Yeah, I like him. He doesn't get on social media.
Yeah, that's probably a smart guy. But it is just interesting. You think when you're trading a guy like Jonathan Quick, and you look at the numbers, and you understand why an LA team that was tied for first place in that situation would want to trade for a goaltender. They had the second worst save percentage in the NHL, so it's going to happen. But you've got to have better communication than that, especially for someone like Jonathan Quick. And so I guess at the end of the day, though, he gets his chance to chase another Stanley Cup, and we'll see how that goes. But it'll be interesting to see if that happens in Vegas and what will happen there. Will it stay there?
Well, he's got something to play for. I'll tell you that. He certainly does have something to play for. He'll be playing angry or perturbed or something like that anyway.
Motivated.
But, again, motivated. Yes, that's very good. But he does have something to play for, and everything worked out well for everybody. And at the end of the day, that's all we're looking for. All right, we're going to take a break. We have much more on this CBJ in 30 Trade Deadline show presented by Ruoff Mortgage. We'll be back with it right after this.
Home is where you plant your roots, the space you feel safest and the heart of your lifestyle. It's a place of chaos, creativity, and comfort. No matter where you go or what you do, it's where your day begins and ends. It's where identities take shape and relationships grow stronger. Your home is more than just a place you live. It's where moments become memories. At Ruoff Mortgage, we know the way home. We'll walk there with you. And with every closing, we're opening doors.
Need someone to be there, knowing they'll always care. Someone who lights your way each and every day. Doing what you love is everything, so we can celebrate the joy it brings. There's so much to protect in our lives. That's why Nationwide is on your side.
Peak performance requires the right preparation.
And just like the Blue Jackets, the Performance Columbus family of dealerships are always investing in people, technology, and facilities.
All to make sure your car or truck performs at its best, keeping you and your family on the road and safe.
Now that's cutting edge.
We're Toyota Direct, Drive Direct, Performance GMC Cadillac and Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram, and of course, Honda Marysville.
The Performance Columbus family of dealerships.
Proud partner of your Columbus Blue Jackets.
Welcome back to CBJ in 30 Trade Deadline, brought to you by Ruoff Mortgage. I'm Bob McElligott, Dylan Tyrer, and Jeff Svoboda are here, and we welcome in right now from The Athletic, the one, the only Aaron Portzline, who covers the Blue Jackets beat. Glad you wore your pass so we can remember who you were.
In case you forgot. I'm allowed to be here.
Yes, you are. Hey, before we start on this trade, the Buffalo Sabres have picked up Jordan Greenway from the Minnesota Wild. So the Sabres putting a big body on that roster after losing to the Blue Jackets earlier in the week, and after getting absolutely throttled last night, 7-1. They got Jordan Greenway.
You know, I like that, and I that's a guy I'm not sure if Columbus was a landing spot for him, but a guy I like a lot, and not a great year, especially compared to what he's done the last couple of years. Big body, can move. I think he's a heck of a player, just having a down year, so I like that a lot.
It almost feels like that Tanner Jeannot deal to Tampa, where if you got a big-bodied guy, you want him for the playoffs.
No, it doesn't feel like that. I don't see 7 picks the other way.
Yeah, we got to wait and see what the return is
yeah,
here.
we don't
I'm
know what the
eagerly
return.
waiting.
Yeah, we don't know what the return is yet. So I doubt it looks like that, but maybe it looks
Player
like
style was all I'm saying.
Jordan Greenway, I think, is the biggest hockey player I've ever seen in my life, like up close. Like, he is massive. Built like an NFL tight end.
It's like a doorway on skates.
I couldn't imagine being like Nick Blankenberg and going into a corner with Jordan Greenway.
Incredible.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
Nick would just slide out of there somehow.
No, he'd
spin out of
somehow
Yeah.
jump into him and blow him up. He has a way of doing that. I don't know how, but he does.
Aaron, we were talking earlier about the 3 moves that the Blue Jackets made, the ones that we thought that they were going to make, the ones that they had to make. They got that all done. When you look back on that, how did they do with what they had to do?
Yeah, well, kind of a housekeeping trade deadline more than you knew it was going to be a player acquisition trade deadline. They're not a buyer, certainly, and not really a seller in the sense that they're completely unloading everything. But you could look at the UFAs and say these guys are likely to move. I was surprised that Nyquist went first. I thought that'd be the trickier of the trades to make given his injury. I think if there's a disappointment, it's the fact that the trade that involved Gavrikov, that brought back the first round pick, among other things, wasn't then able to be followed up with the desired trade to land Chychrun, the defenseman that was on the move from Arizona. They were in the hunt. Their offer they thought was as fair. The difference, my understanding, is that the pick that Arizona was able to get from Ottawa has a chance to be a really good pick, whereas Columbus's pick from the Kings, I assume they're going to make the playoffs, so it's going to be a first-round draft pick, but probably later in the first round than Ottawa's is going to be. But there's also a little bit of risk there. It's a conditional pick. If somehow the Kings fall out of it, it becomes 2 second-round draft picks. So I don't blame Arizona for saying to be in that top 10 or 12 this year, and Columbus could not make that happen. I'm not sure what else Columbus could do. Could they throw next year's first in? That's a risky proposition too, unless you lottery protect that one as well. And Columbus was willing to take all of Chicker. They did not need any salary help, which was apparently the problem with some other teams. But Ottawa's deal was the one that Arizona picked. So that's the one thing you go, boy, that's the dream scenario for this trade deadline. So maybe it fell short of that, but everything else was expected.
Well, and when you look at it, Arizona for the longest time was asking for 2 first-round picks, right?
Correct.
And what they ended up settling for is that first-round pick that you were just talking about, and then a couple of second-round picks, one in 2024 and one in 2025. So actually, did the Coyotes hold on to him too long? Did they have to back down and take less than they would have liked?
Well, I think they took less than they would have liked. I still think from their perspective, a pick that's probably going to be in the top 12 is better than 2 picks in the 20s. Maybe. I think this year you say that because this is supposed to be a really good draft, but maybe once it gets in the 20s, if you talk to scouts, it's kind of similar to other years, that the special talents in the top 10, 12, really it's the top 3 or 4, and then there's a precipitous drop from there. But I think they liked the opportunity to be higher up in the first round. They didn't get all they thought they were going to get. I think from their perspective, too, it had gone on so long, at least a year and a half, that there's a desire at some point to just get this over with and be done with it. Draft picks are going to be valuable going into next year's draft, but are they going to get a better offer after this trade deadline than they are now? I don't think so. Ottawa paid a little bit more than maybe they would this summer because now they've got the player for what they hope is a playoff push.
I sit here and look at the first-round pick that the Blue Jackets get from L.A. in that deal, assuming they make the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
And we heard Yarmo Kekalainen say, and this is what intrigues me, is at some point we can't just keep picking. We have to bolster our roster. Say they don't make a move in the next, I believe, 38 minutes here. Does it still feel like that could be a pick that is more likely or just as likely to perhaps be traded come to the draft rather than actually used when the Jackets get to Nashville this summer?
I completely see it that way. And you look at that dressing room right now. Now it was young before, and now you've taken Gavrikov and Nyquist out. You're going to be bringing a 19-year-old NHL defenseman in next year. You're going to be bringing possibly an 18-year-old centerman in next year. So they're going to get even younger at 2 really crucial spots. Is there enough leadership in that room? Is there the right kind of leadership in that room? Boone Jenner's a heck of a captain. Do they need more? Are Goodbranson and Corrali ready to assume a larger role in that regard? I think that's a major issue. These guys, even a special talent like Connor Bedard, if they're lucky enough to add him, even an Adam Fantilli, great young player, they all talk to Rick Nash. Rick Nash had great guys around him to show him how to be an NHL guy. Sidney Crosby will talk all day about the players in that Pittsburgh room that were there for him when he got there to show him the way. As great as he is, as ready as he was for that challenge at 18 years old, it sure looks like Bedard is wired very similarly in that respect to Crosby. But they've got to surround these players in the right way. Cole Sillinger has not had the year you want him to have. Kent Johnson's been pretty bright, but they need they need infrastructure in that room. I think it's desperate before next season to really make sure that this thing's growing that the right roots are established.
Well, with that in mind, where are you looking then positionally? Because obviously it looks like the Blue Jackets have a bit of a hole on the left side of the defense now. They have a glut of right shot D,
They do.
so maybe you do something there. But are you talking about both in the forward group and on D, or is it just dependent on the player?
Well, I think the desperate need is on D. I think there was a need before Gavrikov. It's a real big need now. They've got enough bodies at forward and really at defense. So I think you're looking at not just picks being moved, but maybe young players being moved for veteran players that can come in and be ready. The thing about their defense that's so interesting, they've spent a lot of draft capital, that's the phrase people like to use now, on young players, on young defensemen, first-round picks, 3 of them the last 2 years. And those guys are all, they hope, going to be really good players. Yurchek will be here next year, we're safe to assume. But they need a bridge to this next group, the Mateychuk, the Svozils, the Kuhlemans. Those guys are not going to be ready next year. They may not be ready the year after. So they got to get to that before, and they've got players here, Peak and Blankenberg and Bean and Boakvist. So they've got numbers, but is it the right mix to be competitive next year? And sadly, because of the injuries on defense especially, you've not learned a lot about some of these guys because they just have. Bean hasn't been out there almost all year. Boakvist has missed a ton of time. I think you like Blankenberg. You like the way Peak's played lately. How does it all fit, and is it ready to be competitive for you? I think what's really exciting is that center position, which has been such a problem. That could look dramatically different just with the draft pick. You assume they're going to get an early draft pick this year that's going to be a centerman. And with Voronkov coming in from Russia, that could be a very different position. But you say that, what do you do with Roslovic? Does Jenner stay in the middle or does he go to the wing? There's all sorts of moving pieces here. It's going to be a fascinating summer.
Speaking of the center position, Cole Sillinger, you tweeted out the Blue Jackets have sent him to the Cleveland roster.
Yes.
Paper transaction. You've got to be, if you're not on that list at 3 o'clock this afternoon, you cannot play in the American Hockey League this year.
Correct.
And obviously the Blue Jackets are not going to the playoffs. If there's an opportunity to get some young players playoff experience, well, Cleveland's got to get in first. But there's a possibility of getting some of that experience there. As you said, for Cole, it has not been a good year for him statistically whatsoever. Maybe this could be something good for him. But he's obviously not going anywhere right now because Sean Corrali gets hurt yesterday.
Correct.
He's out for the remainder of the regular season. So now Lane Peterson goes in, and you're not going to take him out of the lineup talking about Sillinger to move him anywhere right now.
Yeah. So I keep coming back to this with Sillinger. If the organization thinks he needs to go to Cleveland, like really go to Cleveland, not paper move today, but really go to Cleveland, and I think this move is an indication that is still a consideration, then he's got to go there, and you worry about how you fill him, how you replace him at the NHL level. That's a secondary consideration, I think. The first and foremost thing has to be developing Cole Sillinger. So if you feel even a little bit that he needs to go to Cleveland to find his confidence and get his game back, that's where he should go. And you put Foodie in the middle. You put Kent Johnson back in the middle. You call up Justin Richards from Cleveland. Anything. You fill up your lineup in Columbus, but the concerns of that player developing the right way in a season like this, I think, have to take precedent. This is, again, what we've been saying for weeks now. They have thought about sending him there for a long time. It seems obvious they plan to send him there at some date that may already be established. He's going to be recalled today after 3 o'clock. He's playing tonight against Seattle. Nothing of that changes, but now he's eligible to go, as you said. So look for that. The other thing is Jiricek, I would suspect, is going to be up here late this season. He can play, I believe it's 7 more games before it count. They're not going to kick in his first year, obviously, but maybe with 7 games left in the season, that's a move you look for as well. And the only reason I don't think they sent more players down today is you get 4 recalls after the trade deadline. So Sillinger today, after 3 o'clock when he's recalled, is going to be one of those moves already. If they were to send clear Marchenko and Johnson and, say, Bernie down there and recall them all today, they've burned all of them. And then you can only call guys up in emergency situations. So they're not going to do that. But Sillinger looks like at some point he's going to go there and play. It may just be for the playoffs, maybe late in the regular season.
Yeah, but an emergency recall, you can create that, can't you?
Just limp out of the rink one day and we can come up with a story for you. Yeah.
With the prospect of David Jiricek coming up at the end of the season, Porty, and Bob just hinted at it, the Monsters have to make the playoffs, right, to play those meaningful games. That's going to be worth it for a player like Cole Sillinger to be down there at that point, or even a player like David Jiricek to be down there at that point. You want them playing those games. Is there any concern for you? And obviously you want to see him in the National League. That's of the utmost importance. But he is such an important piece of that Cleveland Monsters team, taking him away from that, because we have seen it all year with the Monsters, and Yarmo talked about it. If the Blue Jackets weren't so hurt this year, the Monsters would be one of the best teams in the American Hockey League. Is that a concern for you, that if you bring him up, you risk the possibility of them struggling?
Well, so they're 3 points out right now, if my math is correct.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think they're 0-3-1 in their last 4. So nothing is assured. If it's late in the season, I would agree with you there, Dylan, that if they're still fighting to get into the playoffs, Jiricek's not going anywhere. I think it's so important for them. I mean, just to be in a race is going to be a good thing, but to get into the playoffs will be a really positive thing for all those guys. yes, late season NHL games, there's no way that those should replace him playing in Cleveland and giving them the best crack they have at getting to the playoffs.
There's also the possibility and the prospect of some college free agents to be signed, right?
Yeah.
That process is opening up at this point in the season with the college year ending, and maybe you bolster that Cleveland roster that way. I'm just
yeah, and they could
ideas.
send guys down, right? So they could still send some. Johnson can't go. These guys that are not on the roster right now can't go, but they can keep that group together. Sillinger adding to that roster would be a real boost, you would think. And the chance for him to play with his brother, I think would be pretty cool, because I'm not sure that happens any other way.
Right, exactly.
Anything today in this last 30 minutes, or are the Blue Jackets done?
Well, I texted the boss man on my way up just to make sure he's not playing in the game, because that would tell you that there's nothing happening. And he's not playing in the game. He is answering his phone. So there's a chance. I don't suspect that there's anything brewing. But if you remember last year, 2:59 is when Max Domi went through. So he's not talking until 5:15. So maybe things can get processed after the fact, and we'll know about him later.
It would have to be special, though, wouldn't you think?
I mean, I would think. We've wondered all along you knew the UFAs were coming. How much further does he go if there's a market for a player that is seen? And there was talk. People have called about Boone Jenner. Of course they have. And his name's popped up a little more than I expected at this trade deadline. And everything I've heard from people who would know is that that's not even a consideration. You do something like that, you've ripped up the room now, I think in a pretty significant way. Just talking about the leadership we did earlier, there's no way that's happening. I just don't see that as even a consideration for that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. Like you said, surprise can come. It's not likely that somebody picks up the phone at the 11th hour and says, "Hey, do you want to do this?" But
yeah, there's almost always sort of talk before that. It's never sprung on you at the minute. So I think they'd have some sort of inclination that something was coming, but no sign of that.
Gordy, thank you so much. Appreciate having you on.
Yeah.
If that thing does happen, we're going to ask you to come back.
Absolutely. And I'll know where I'm going this time.
Your seat's warm.
Thanks,
Sounds
guys.
good. Aaron Portzline, he covers the Blue Jackets beat for The Athletic. We've got much more to come on this CBJ and 30 Trade Deadline show, brought to you by Ruoff Mortgage.
Wendy's without the Wendy's app is like a hamburger without the fresh beef. No! Level up. Get the app to order ahead, order delivery, earn free food, and get app-exclusive offers. One app, all the Wendy's. Wendy's without the Wendy's app is like nugs without the sauce. No! Level up. Get the app to order ahead, order delivery, earn free food, and get app-exclusive offers. One app, all the Wendy's.
Hey, attention all Blue Jacket fans. Guess who is the new player for Myers Jewelry? It's me, Elvis. I'm so happy to be part of the Myers Jewelers team. With the Jeff and Scott, looking forward to talking about all the great jewelry such as a Breitling watch, John Hardy, Doc Corey, and Hearts on Fire. So boys, do I finally get to do the Myers Jewelers point with you guys?
Let's do it. Experience Myers Jewelers.
Hey, Fifth Line. Protecting your teeth should always be a part of your game plan. I know it's a part of mine. I'm Jack Rostovic of the Columbus Blue Jackets. I protect my teeth and regularly see the dentist so I can focus on my game and not my pain.
Thanks to Delta Dental of Ohio for committing to building healthy, smart, vibrant communities for all. Remember to protect your smile. A healthy mouth equals a healthy body. Learn more at deltadentaloh.com.
CBJ 30 Trade Deadline presented by Ruoff Mortgage. Jeff Rimmer joining the panel here, and that means none of us will be able to get a word in. So, with that being said, he's got all the info. I know he does. But with that being said, before we get to Jeff, Dylan, the Jordan Greenway trade, Minnesota, the details are in as to what the Wild is getting back.
Yes, Michael Russo, who covers the Minnesota Wild for The Athletic, reports that the Wild get a 2023 second-round draft pick that belongs to the Vegas Golden Knights originally, and a 2024 fifth-round draft pick for Jordan Greenway. No salary retained, so the Minnesota Wild able to free up $3 million in the next 2 years. Obviously, that helps them with some of the things they have to do this offseason. They're going to be cap-strapped. But then the Red Wings trading Oscar Sundqvist to the Minnesota Wild, it has been reported. So a potential for another big body there to seemingly replace a player like Jordan Greenway. So
Team Sweden is what they are, or soon becoming. They got Nyquist the other day, and now they pick up another Swede. I think they got about 5 or 6 of them now.
Yeah, Johansson too, right?
Yeah.
Well, does that mean less contact? I thought there's more contact in the playoffs.
Well, there usually is.
I described it earlier. They've got all those big guys to bang, and then the secondary scorers.
They've got
right?
Reeves. They've got Foligno, Marcus Foligno. They'll be fine.
If I'm Boquist, I'm not answering the phone, though.
Jeff, in watching that trade with the Red Wings, it seems like Steve Yzerman, those back-to-back losses to the Ottawa Senators, looked at his team and he said, okay, we're getting better, but I don't think we're quite there yet. So he's always a big-picture guy. He's looking ahead and felt that it was time that if he had some pieces that he could sell off and get some capital in return, that's what he's decided to do.
Absolutely. Trades Verona today. I don't know what the issue was there, but, of course, he left the team for a while to go into the NHL's assistance program. But I'll tell you what, he can put the puck in the net, and he will help St. Louis.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you like St. Louis taking the chance? Because I think it's an awesome move for what they're trying to do and kind of retool on the fly.
I liked the guy when he was in Washington, and obviously got off to a pretty good start with Detroit, but for whatever reasons, there was a disconnect with them, and he moves on now. I think it's a good pickup by St. Louis. And you have to understand, when you talk about general manager Steve Yzerman, probably his closest GM, confidant, is Armstrong. And they have worked several times for Team Canada together.
You mean Doug Armstrong?
Doug Armstrong.
Because remember, because Bill's in Arizona.
Oh, yeah. I got Bill Armstrong on the brain because with Chychrun, I'm so glad that saga is over. By the way,
and you're not happy with the outcome.
No.
Right.
No. But let me say one thing here. I am, and it's a question that I certainly want to put forward to Yarmo Kekalainen, and that is, do you guys realize how many first and second round draft picks have been traded in this draft alone? Not all for 2023. They're moving in 24, 25, even 26. There are first round picks. And then you look at second picks. They are so coveted now, more so than ever. And if you look back on what's happened this week and you say, okay, which team perhaps has made the most out of draft picks, it's the Nashville Predators. I mean, the Boston Bruins gave up a pair to pick up some pretty good quality here as they go for, they're just throwing it all. Their first team to 100 points, the fastest in the history of the National Hockey League. But you look at the number of first and second round picks, and Boston says, we don't mind, even though they could very well lose both Bergeron and Krejci to retirement after this season. They still feel they've got a pretty good nucleus, and I think they do. But fact of the matter is, I'm amazed at the number of picks, and certainly, as I started to say, Nashville, they just loaded up on the picks. And Barry Trotz, my good friend Barry Trotz, boy, today was David Poyle's last official duty. When they get to the draft, it pretty well will be, from what I understand, Barry Trotz calling the shots. And David's pushed all those chips to the center, and Nashville's going to have, I think, some fun here, this draft and future drafts.
He loaded them up for the future, that's
sure
for sure.
Did.
Yeah, and some guys, as a first-year GM, might be intimidated. Probably inside they might be. They would never project that outside. But Barry Trotz is probably just licking his chops for that.
Oh, you know he is. And he wanted a management job. I've talked to him a couple of times over the course of this season. He lost his mom and put his dad into a assisted living center. and sold the house, so he wasn't prepared to take another coaching job after being fired by the Islanders. But I can tell you that he did hint that when things were going bad in Toronto at the start of the season, he was close to becoming coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But he's preferred all the way along a management job. They love him. Ownership loves him in Nashville. And I'll tell you what, if the truth be told, David Poile was very calmly pushed to retirement. He's been talking about it for a while, and I think ownership said, hey, this is the time we want to get Barry Trotz here before he goes somewhere else, potentially as a coach or in management.
Yeah, and new ownership coming in there, too, a little bit. They've got a group, but they're getting a new man as head of the group there, too, so trying to change it around a little bit. What is has there been a trade that has surprised you above all others so far?
Not really. Not really. I mean, the speculation here over the last several weeks has pretty well indicated players that were going to be moved. I don't think really there's a surprising trade that you could say, wow, sit back and say, hey, that's a very surprising trade. I think a lot of it was expected. Now, what is a surprise, I don't know if you guys have heard, but there have been lengthy discussions throughout yesterday, today, and perhaps even before between Pittsburgh and Vancouver. Ohio product J.T. Miller, who just signed that long-term contract. They tried to get a deal done today, but it's there's too many missing pieces, or too many pieces that they have to work on. The trading deadline is 3 o'clock, 17 minutes from now. That's something that I guarantee you will be revisited in the summer, because talking to some folks with the Vancouver Canucks, they want to get younger. They're not interested. They're resetting, rebuilding, call it whatever you want. And I think that Pittsburgh was in desperate need to pick up a player or two. And right now, their general manager and their ownership are under the gun. The fans are up in arms. And this week they put out their season ticket renewals, and it has not gone over very well. They want Hextall fired. The only guy they want to see stay is the coach, Sullivan. He's on a long-term deal. He's not going anywhere. But all of a sudden, they're starting to win games again, and I'm not counting them out for the playoffs, not at all.
Yeah, I don't know if Nick Bonino and Dmitry Kulikov are going to be enough. And those are two guys that they picked up today. But it is ironic that as soon as the fans really started getting vocal, and they were chanting to fire Hextall a couple of games ago when Edmonton went in there and completely smoked them. But all the people that the media was complaining about, Brock McGinn's and Teddy Blugers, they're all gone. They're all gone in a week, out the door with other guys coming in. So, but as you said, Jeff, it gets desperate there. And look, I won't shed a single tear if they don't make the playoffs. No. Believe me, I will not.
Even if you're from Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah. You sounded really Pittsburgh there for a second. Out the door. Like that.
Did I say out the door?
Yeah. I think
Get him out of here.
Yeah, you were trending down that pathway.
Guys, we have breaking news.
What do you got?
Pennsylvania's other team has made a trade. James Van Riemsdyk being dealt to the Red Wings from the Flyers. What do you think Steve Yzerman's up to right now? A lot's going on there.
The Yzer plan.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Right. But
well, he must think they, despite those two losses
All right,
back to
does
back.
that one surprise you?
A
Did we
little
get a
bit.
surprise? Okay.
I expected Van Riemsdyk to go to Winnipeg. They need that type of player. To Calgary. And I think there were some discussions with those teams. I'm a little surprised Detroit does it, but they obviously moved Sundqvist out. They probably feel that here's an addition. And, hey, he's an unrestricted free agent, so he's gone at the end of the year. But, hey, yeah, that one kind of surprises me.
Yeah, NHL Network reporting there. You said you weren't surprised by anything, but I am curious what you think about the Washington Capitals seemingly waving the white flag on this season and trading a player like Dmitry Orlov.
Well, when they lost their captain, their leader, and the eventual National Hockey League's all-time goal scorer in Ovechkin due to the death of his father, and Carlson on the blue line, that was a huge loss for them. I think the general manager there just sat back and said, you know what? We're not going to be in the playoffs, and it's time to kind of clean things up, and they have. And they've got some cap space now that they can move forward with. So, yeah, not surprised, but at the same time, they've made some pretty good moves, and they're still take a look. Mathematically, they're very much
Right.
still in the playoff hunt.
Do you view them as being in a similar situation to a team like the St. Louis Blues, where they're trying to kind of rebuild on the fly here?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know that Doug Armstrong is going to make several moves to improve that team in the offseason. They're not going to go through a lengthy rebuild like Philadelphia coming out a couple of weeks ago. And our buddy John Tortorella sending out a letter to season ticket holders and the fans that, hey, we're rebuilding. Chuck Fletcher wondering if he's going to have the job here next week, next month, prior to the draft. Who knows what's going to happen there. So, yeah, definitely. Hey, did you guys hear what happened on TSN today?
I did. I watched it live.
You watched it live.
It was a fantastic day. Maybe a precursor to what's going to happen.
I sure hope so, because the Columbus Blue Jackets, with the number 1 pick after the, as they called it, the fake lottery draft.
Did you see who got the second overall pick?
Yes, Vancouver moved up.
It got dicey there for a second. Vancouver with the opportunity to pick number 1 overall and draft the hometown kid and Connor Bedard, but it was the Blue Jackets. When
I think we should just count that one.
Oh, that's what I said too.
I would. I see no problem. It was legit. There was no, I know there's some people that feel, there are some people that feel that the National Hockey League maybe steers the number 1 overall pick in a certain direction, but as I tell people when they say that, no chance the Blue Jackets are going to get him because the NHL will determine where he goes. I say that's a bunch of bunk, because do you really think the National Hockey League would ever think of their wisdom that they would want Connor McDavid in Edmonton?
Yep.
Just figure that one out.
Yeah,
they could put him in New York. They could put him in Los Angeles. They could put him in Chicago. Edmonton, not so much.
My question, Jeff, I love to have a couple of Jeffs here at the same table. Do you have a winner?
I'll trade you 2 BioSteels for your computer right now.
I didn't realize we were actually making trades on the trade deadline show.
I might.
I'm going to decline that offer. I need a conditional
Svoboda,
laptop.
if you make that trade, you're off the show right now. You're just off.
I am not a general manager.
Jeff
who makes
has already
that kind of
declared himself a BioSteel fiend, so it might be in the cards. I don't know how much he values that brand new computer of his, but
I need at least a case of BioSteel.
I didn't even know it was a brand new computer.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you 3.
And if he says no, just dump the BioSteel all over the keyboard. That's what I gotta do.
And notice where he got the third one. Stole it from you to trade it back to you for it. I mean, that... You should be a GM, Jeff. You should be a Rimmer.
He sounds
be a magician
like one.
in Vegas right now, sleight of hand.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, everybody wants to know who wins trades, who wins the trade deadline. Do you have a team right now you like the most, what they've done here?
Well, I said a few moments ago, Nashville certainly has loaded up, but I think the Boston Bruins, when you think of the players that they've acquired here at the deadline, I think most definitely Boston.
Do you think the West has any chance?
No, not a chance. Because all the teams are loaded up here. I mean, what's going to happen with the Rangers? Rangers think they've got the Stanley Cup. They've already got the parade route set out.
You saw what happened to them last night?
Yeah.
That was a great game, though.
And look at Toronto. The Maple Leafs and the fans there. They think they've got the cup now that they've got O'Reilly. But I was saying earlier today to Jody Shelley, that they've got too many slow forwards. O'Reilly, Tavares, where's the speed? And as you guys know, in the playoffs, a lot of physicality and a lot of speed.
It's a lot of pressure on Mitch Marner to deliver in the postseason,
For
right?
sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I don't see Matthews playing anywhere near the level he played last year. There's an injury there that we're not hearing about.
Tell you what, if they don't make it through that first round, be a lot of job openings in Toronto.
Oh, absolutely.
It could be for you. You want to be a GM?
Boy, maybe if I was about 25 years younger, I'd take a stab at it,
Just
but not at this point. We're on the back nine.
He just talked about David Poile being gently escorted out the door. So.
Well, you can call up your friends like Barry Trotz and make some deals.
Yeah, I could. I can call more than him. I've got more friends around the National Hockey League.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to find out if Jeff Rimmer has a brand new computer sitting in front of him with no BioSteel on the set. All right, this is CBJ and 30 Trade Deadline, brought to you by Ruoff Mortgage. Back with more next.
We don't do it for the slap shots.
Or the breakaways. Not for the one-timers either.
We don't do it.
We don't do it for the roar of the crowd. We do it for this.
Look at that strength, that confidence. Huntington is proud to partner with Columbus Blue Jackets to sponsor Hockey to Go and Summer Takeover. Free hockey clinics for kids in our communities, because stronger kids make for stronger communities. Huntington, welcome.
Home is where you plant your roots, the space you feel safest and the heart of your lifestyle. It's a place of chaos, creativity, and comfort. No matter where you go or what you do, it's where your day begins and ends. It's where identities take shape and relationships grow stronger. Your home is more than just a place you live. It's where moments become memories. At Ruoff Mortgage, we know the way home. We'll walk there with you. And with every closing, we're opening doors.
At Ohio Health, you can see your doctor here. Or here. On this. Or on these. And no matter if you're over here, over there, or anywhere in between, you'll feel good knowing Ohio Health provides the finest care anywhere. Schedule care today at ohiohealth.com/finestcare.
Here at CBJ 30 Trade Deadline, brought to you by Ruoff Mortgage. Jody Shelley's going to come in and join us here in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, big news, Dylan Tyrer.
Yeah, so Elliot Friedman 12 minutes ago reported hearing James Van Riemsdyk to Detroit pending a physical and trade call. Now, 30 seconds ago, he's put out that something happened with James Van Riemsdyk in Detroit, and the deal is off as of now. Said we'll see what happens, but there are obviously other suitors in there for James Van Riemsdyk. He's probably the biggest domino yet to fall, and it looked like he was going to the Red Wings, but something's happened. So let's see. They've got 9 minutes to make something happen here with James Van Riemsdyk.
Maybe they've got a better deal. Maybe Yzerman said, we're not going to be in the playoffs. The guy's unrestricted. Maybe we don't want him. Or it could be the deal that I tried to make here with Jeff. He just ran off. I tried to get his computer.
Yeah, he just
and
quit.
He left. He left. He was afraid I was going to take it.
He would be a terrible GM, obviously. He didn't like the deal, and he just bolted. He was gone. Nowhere to be found again.
I mean, I don't hate that. Playing hard to get.
Hey, Jeff, you mentioned Calgary a few minutes ago.
Yes.
How surprised are you that it's been nothing with Calgary?
Very surprising, because that's one of the places I thought Van Riemsdyk would go. They've got a lot of perimeter players there right now. To be honest with you, Tkachuk is gone. I wouldn't say Johnny Gaudreau is a guy that's going to play in front of the net all the time. But I'll tell you what, he wasn't afraid, and we've certainly witnessed it this season. He'll go to the net. They don't have anybody. Huberdeau is more of a perimeter player and a shooter. Now you have a situation where Van Riemsdyk would certainly make a difference to them. They certainly had the money to take the contract. I'm surprised that's one player that I thought was targeted and would be a perfect fit for the Calgary Flames. So, yeah, I don't know really why they haven't made a move. I mean, could they make a move? Just because 3 o'clock comes and goes doesn't mean that we're finished and we can close up shop. If you recall, a lot of trades are announced well after 3 o'clock. We've even heard some at 3:30 and 4. But if they're lined up, the trade calls, and all trades after the Eric Lindros deal way back when both the New York Rangers and Philadelphia Flyers thought that they had Lindros because Marcel Aubut of the Quebec Nordiques traded Lindros twice. True story. So from that point on, no more was it a fax machine situation. It became a trade call. So trade calls can be announced, and they can line up, and once they're approved by Central Registry, the National Hockey League, then the trades can be made official and announced. But as we've seen here for the last several years, the media get a hold of the deals a lot of times before the deals are done, and there's a perfect example with Van Riemsdyk and Elliot Friedman.
Well, I'll keep my eyes and ears peeled and let you know if anything comes down the pike here.
And speaking of, to go back to the Flames for just a second, you're talking about going to the front of the net. Goaltending has been an issue with them. There's no question. Goaltending has been an issue with the Calgary Flames. They haven't had great goaltending, and they've been giving up a lot of goals. But then you look at a game like last night where they lose 2-1. Blake Coleman has that lone goal, and when the game is over, Blake Coleman says, look, we're a really good team that doesn't know how to score or how to win.
Yeah.
And so that's where they are
24 right now. 1-goal losses to lead the National Hockey League, Calgary Flames.
Jody Shelley, welcome to the panel today.
Thanks, Bob. Good to see you way over there. How you doing, Jeffrey? Hi, Dylan.
Good.
Hi, Jody.
How's it going?
Excellent.
Looking good, man. Like that zip up there.
Thanks, buddy. You got
It's
the
a new
same one at home?
I don't know. I'll have to check.
You got a throwback on. I like it.
If not, I'll have to maybe try to work out a trade.
I'll switch
I'm
you.
into trading.
I'll switch you.
Well, we can talk about it after.
Are you up to date with the latest, Jody? James Van Riemsdyk to the Red Wings just
Did it
fell,
happen?
It fell through.
Yeah, I
moments ago.
heard that. Now, that's interesting because, that's a big contract. He's in the last year of a nice deal that he signed there back home in Philadelphia. He was there for his second stint. And he's a player that he can score goals. And, Detroit is in a position where they can actually push a little bit here the last 20 games. So, and would he be a player that they would look to later? I don't know. But I like the value of Van Riemsdyk because he's been well coached. He played for Babcock. He's now played for John Tortorella. He's seen some great things in the National Hockey League. I know he doesn't pass the eye test all the time because he's big and he doesn't move as quick, but he knows how to score goals. And I think he's underrated because of his contract. People think it's too much, but if you get him and get him as a veteran in your organization next year, I think that could be a key piece.
And again, go back. Calgary needs goals. He would get them. He'd be the guy that's on the power play, tipping pucks and standing in front of the net, providing a screen. He's also a guy that can score coming in off the wing. They need scoring. I'm really shocked that Calgary hasn't stepped up and made that move.
Calgary did just make a deal, by the way. Defenseman, though.
And for James Van Riemsdyk, put Sutter on his coaching list. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true.
Hit
very
the
true.
trifecta in that case.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, we were just talking about Calgary not making a deal, but Elliot Friedman reporting that Troy Stetcher goes from the Coyotes to the Flames.
Not a big deal.
No, not a big deal.
No, that's a depth move,
Yeah.
provided they make the playoffs, and they're in a bit of a battle to make them. But you can never have enough defensemen, right?
Well, especially when you get to the second and third round, that's when teams that haven't made these moves regret them, right? But it's interesting to see the fine tuning that's been going on with all these teams, because whether it's cap space, draft picks, or pieces for the push, it's been one of those deadlines that I don't think you can say it's happened this way. Maybe this is the way of the future for the way this will be for the rest of the time, but how in tune teams are with where they're at and what they're doing. And I heard you talking about Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals. It's a great example. And it's acceptable now not to be like, we have to go all in. We have to do this to make the push for the locker room and for our organization. It's more of, let's think 3 or 4 years down the road.
The thing for me is the number of deals that have been made, and this is the biggest surprise, before today's deadline. First deal of any significance was the Horvat deal. That was done at the end of January. Then fast forward, O'Reilly's trade was made mid-February. From that O'Reilly trade till this morning, or midnight last night, how many trades do you think? 40. There were 40 trades, exactly 40 deals. We talked about first and second round picks, incredible. In total, as of this afternoon before I came, there were 48 draft picks dealt by the teams. But the surprise is the number of trades made before today. That's really the surprise for me.
Yeah, and again, the arms race in the East, right? You mentioned the O'Reilly thing. As soon as the O'Reilly thing happens, now there are other teams that are going, okay, now what are we going to do? How are you going to counter this? And not even so much Tampa, because what has Tampa really done? They got Tanner Jeannot. They added him. They felt they needed him. They feel like they have a good core. They've been to the Stanley Cup final 3 years in a row. Okay. But the New York Rangers, then they started jumping into it, right? Tarasenko gets added. They find a way to put Patrick Kane in there. So once the arms race began, everybody was all in.
The rumor this afternoon is Tampa may not be finished, although, again, they'll have had to have the trade call in. The rumor this afternoon was they were trying to find a partner to take some money and have Anaheim take some money, and they take Klingberg. Imagine if Klingberg goes there. He's been great in the playoffs the last 2 seasons prior to, obviously, this one.
And they have a history of doing that, to get a D-man like that before it comes playoff time.
Well, and you talk about the early trades, and it's when you have a team like Boston that's so dominant, and you see your matchup early, it's quite clear how good you have to be. And there's teams that are in the middle of the pack, but there's that upper echelon of teams who feel really good about what they've been doing the past few years to get where they're at. Toronto's one of those teams, obviously. Pittsburgh's a team that I think surprised out of the gate, but now they seem to have to make that push. So when you have someone, a measuring stick, who every team has seen them now once at least, and a lot of them are going to see him again. You have got to react, and that's where you're seeing these teams load up, and that's why things have started early.
This may be an indication of things to come as far as these early trades. I'll tell you, I feel bad for our colleagues in Toronto.
No.
Hey, they're on the air for 9 hours.
But they've had all their stories planned. It's been.
I mean, it's entertaining, but
they did the lottery for crying out loud. We already talked about it. That was a time killer.
James Duthie of TSN, who's probably, for me anyway, the greatest sports host in television. He's just a terrific person, but he's just great on the air. He was already whining at 8:02 that they were on the air for 9 hours. For 9 hours. And he was, what are we going to do? There have been so many trades already made.
It's also 3 o'clock, by the way, just so everybody knows.
Bruce, there it is even on their panel.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'll tell you what, they had plenty of time to make their promos, which were fantastic.
Oh.
That involved Bruce Boudreau. But just think how many producers aren't running around to find footage because they've had the footage for the past 10 days.
Exactly.
Just to recap, right?
Yeah, but and they've had a great entertainment value, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Jody, since you're just joining us for the first time, what did you think about what the Blue Jackets did? They moved out the guys that we knew that they were going to move out, the unrestricted free agents. What they've got in return, what do you like here?
I think they took care of business. I mean, that's what they have to do. It's they don't want to be where they're at today. Obviously, this wasn't the plan coming into the season, being in the position of 32 out of 32 teams. And, you have free agents that you have to get value for. And so understanding that, they made the right moves. And unfortunately, two great Blue Jackets, two guys that you think of that locker room and you think of Gavrikov and his value to Marchenko, who's now, it's all he knows is the Blue Jackets with Gavrikov. When you think of Korpisalo, you think of him and his adversity, and you really admire that. And those are the type of people you want around. But unfortunately, due to the business, they got the best value they could to help this team in the next few years. And it is draft picks, but we talked about it the other day where, the draft is coming. And Yarmo and his team does a great job historically at the draft. So these pieces that they're putting in line now, this could be one of the best Blue Jackets drafts ever in regard of some of the players that might fall in their lap. But take a step further. This team needs some veteran guys when these guys leave. And you don't win with 17 and 18 and 19, or 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. You win with those veteran guys. So hopefully in a couple of years, the guys like Gavrikov and Korpisalo are those targets that this team is after.
Almost $20 million has been saved by the Blue Jackets if you add up all the contract dollars. So you can look at it a couple of ways. Jody talks about the draft picks. Well, they've got 2 first-round picks as we sit here presently. You don't have to necessarily make a pick. They're going to keep that first pick, and we all hope the TSN draft was right and the Jackets get that first pick. But
I miss that.
But yeah, it was really good. And they even had Bedard on to ask him, how do you feel about going to the Columbus Blue Jackets? Well, it's a fake draft. He wasn't even going to respond to that.
They should have had Yarmo on for practice.
Yeah. But anyway, they could trade that second first-round pick that they picked up and from L.A. and move that for a quality young player. They could also look at free agency, and this is going to be a good year for free agency. We know they want to rebuild that blue line. There's an opportunity to pick up a defenseman or two through free agency. And, hey, Yarmo, I think, is in the driver's seat. I think as Jody says, they've done a great job.
Hey, and we didn't even talk about Voracek's salary being moved out.
No.
To the Arizona Coyotes.
That's included in that money.
Yeah, I know. It's included in your number. We just never talked about it because Jake hasn't been here for so long, but it does play big in the future.
Jackets have made some good moves. Yarmo and his staff, I think, should be commended for that because now they've got a lot of flexibility that they didn't have just a week ago.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you the opportunity to commend him on that.
All right.
Yourself coming up in just a moment. Because joining us next on CBJ and 30 Trade Deadline is Blue Jackets General Manager Yarmo Kekalainen. Today's show brought to you by Ruoff Mortgage. We'll be right back.
Cardboard boxes? Break them down and recycle, superhero.
Make your recycling count. Monkey.
We need someone to be there, knowing they'll always care. Someone who lights your way. each and every day. Doing what you love is everything, so we can celebrate the joy it brings. There's so much to protect in our lives. That's why Nationwide is on your side.
Hey, attention all Blue Jacket fans. Guess who is the new player for Myers Jewelry? It's me, Elvis. I'm so happy to be part of the Myers Jewelers team. With Jeff and Scott, looking forward to talking about all the great jewelry, such as a Breitling watch, John Hardy, Tuck Corey, and Hearts on Fire. So boys, do I finally get to do the Myers Jewelers point with you guys?
Let's do it. Experience Myers Jewelers.
Home is where you plant your roots, the space you feel safest and the heart of your lifestyle. It's a place of chaos, creativity, and comfort. No matter where you go or what you do, it's where your day begins and ends. It's where identities take shape and relationships grow stronger. Your home is more than just a place you live. It's where moments become memories. At Ruoff Mortgage, we know the way home. We'll walk there with you. And with every closing, we're opening doors.
Thanks to the folks over at Ruoff Mortgage for today's CBJ 30 Trade Deadline show. We're joined right now by Blue Jackets General Manager Yarmo Kekalainen. Been a quiet guy today. A little noisy earlier in the week, a little quiet today.
The whole league was quiet.
Yeah.
what was all the deadline shows were pretty quiet too, I guess. But yeah, our apologies.
Were you surprised at how many deals were done early this year as opposed to what we normally see? How many times we've been sitting on this day and there's all these rumored things and none of them happen? This year, a lot of stuff's happening, and it's been happening for 3 weeks.
Yeah, I guess everybody's preference is to get their things done well before the deadline if you can. Sometimes you can't. You may have some options to think about, and you know that drags the decision on, and you want to make sure that you make the best possible deal. But a lot of times, if you get what you need, if that's something that you were looking for, and you can close the deal before, that's much better than scrambling 30 seconds before the deadline like last year. So,
how happy were you when you were able to find a deal for Vladislav Gavrikov and Jonas Korpisalo? I mean, those were the two big guys that after Nyquist got hurt that you knew you wanted to move. There were some rumors about Gavrikov maybe going earlier. It didn't happen. How happy were you were able to find a landing spot for both those guys?
Well, happy and sad. Two great Blue Jackets that played here for a long time and were a big part of our team and well-liked guys in the locker room and good people. So those trades are hard to do, but where we're at right now in the standings and how we're building our future and then becoming unrestricted free agents this summer, those were necessary moves for us.
Yarmo, before you came on, not to pat you on the back here now, but you definitely made, I think, some significant moves. The players moving out, and again, they were assets that you had to move. They were unrestricted free agents. But you've got some ability here now. You freed up close to $20 million in contracts that you can now, obviously, you talk about free agency. That's one way of going. You also have the assets and draft picks, in particular, a second first-round pick that you can either use as and select a player later in the first round with LA's picks, or you could move that perhaps for a young player that's going to give the Jackets term and obviously a player that will figure prominently for years to come.
Yeah, and that's probably what we'll be looking for. We want to take the next step, and we want to get our team better. I think some of our young guys are ready to take the next step, so we need some immediate help, but not in a short-term contract that would just help us next year, but into the future as well. But our core group's shaping up, and we need some leadership around it. We need some experience around it, and there will be some players available that can fit that type of role. And with the pick that we have, the extra pick, it's going to be anywhere from 17 to 32 if LA ends up winning the cup. So we'll be LA fans until they make the playoffs, which it looks like they are, and then not so much after that.
A quick exit after that. As you look back on this season, and obviously we all of us here and Blue Jacket fans would have preferred a different outcome, and the Jackets looking forward to the Stanley Cup playoffs, but that's not going to happen. But as you look back on this season, is there anything that you say, maybe we should have done something different here and we'd be in a better position at this time of the season?
You're always second guessing some things, and you want to, if you had that time machine, you could go back and make some different decisions. But we went into the season knowing that we were young still, and maybe last season maybe we got a little bit ahead of ourselves. We had a pretty good season, one game under 500 with a group that nobody really expected much of, and we expected some growth this year and be better with the addition of Johnny Gaudreau. But we got off to a bad start. There's no question about it. That was a disappointment, 3-9 off, right out of the gate, and then the injuries hit us. And when you lose a guy like Zach Werenski for the remainder of the season, those are the type of holes that you can't fill. But I guess you always wish that you had that time machine and you could go back and do something differently. There's, so unpredictable when you're looking at young athletes, young hockey players, how they're going to develop. We can't really say that a lot of guys on our teams would have exceeded expectations this year. So that's a disappointment, obviously. But then there are some bright spots with the young guys that we have, like Kent Johnson playing very well and growing throughout the season. Kirill Marchenko coming in, he's second in rookie goal scoring right now in the entire NHL. I think Kent Johnson's fourth in the points. So the bright spots are always much more pleasant to look at and evaluate than something that you could do differently, because we don't have that option, unfortunately.
Yarmo, did you accomplish all you wanted to with this deadline? Did you have more expectations for this organization for this moment?
No, I think we accomplished what we wanted to do. We were obviously looking at some options that could improve our team now and into the future before the deadline, but half the league at least is taken out for those options because they just want to add right now, gearing up for the playoffs. Some teams are still making a push to try to make the playoffs, so it's probably more than 16 teams, maybe 20 teams right now that are trying to add, so that leaves only 12 teams that are willing to do some trades, and those are mostly deadline trades where a pending UFA is going to a team that's competing for the playoff spot right now or in the playoffs. So not that many options available for us. We wouldn't take a UFA, obviously, at this point and hoping to sign him. If we were to add a player that becomes a UFA next summer, we would have to be sure that he is also signed into the future with us. And the guys with some term left, we didn't think that it was a fit that we could jump on right now, but there'll be a lot more options available in the off season.
Did you get more phone calls this year than you expected, or was it kind of status quo for you?
We got a lot of phone calls when we still had Gavrikov and Korpisalo. Obviously, the injury to Gus Nyquist took the number of phone calls down a bit. That was unfortunate for both Gus and us, and because he was a player that a lot of teams were interested in. But once he went down with the injury, and it's pretty clear that he might not even play before the playoffs, maybe come back just before the playoffs, but that takes a lot. All those teams that are pushing, trying to make the playoffs, who need the help now, that those teams stopped calling, and that's that's to be expected. But there were a lot of calls and a lot of teams that were interested in Korpisalo and Gavrikov.
What about getting calls on picking off some of your players here, some of the prospects and some of the young talent? Did you have those calls and you had to say, I don't want names, but say not available?
A lot of teams want our top prospects, and the situation we're in. Some may think that we're desperate to get better immediately by selling some of our young prospects, but that's not going to happen. We're setting our sights into the future, and it's going to be a good one once all of these pieces come together, mature and grow together, and adding a few, like I said, few more pieces with some experience. We're going to take the next step.
Yarmo, you mentioned the growth of the young players. Has a decision been made, if any, will be on the list of Cleveland and be eligible to play once the playoffs start? Should they make the playoffs or help them get down there and make the playoffs moving ahead here?
Well, we papered Cole Sillinger down today and brought him back up after 3 o'clock, so he has that eligibility now. Go and play in the playoffs for Cleveland if they make it. The unfortunate rule that the NHL has in place is that you only get 4 recalls.
Right.
We have Chinnikov down there now, played his first game, played very well. We have Trafik Swolansky there, Josh Dunn, who've played great this year, that we'd love to give an opportunity to play on this level and really show what they can do down the stretch. But at the same time, Cleveland's in a playoff hunt, and those guys are the most important players for that team. And so if we were to send Marchenko, Ken Johnson, and Sillinger all on paper down and then bring him back, we'd burn 3 recalls already, and that, we'd have 1 more available. So, those are kind of tricky decisions that we have to make, and we decided to do it with Cole Sillinger. We believe in Cole. He had a great first season. He's had a little bit of a setback this year. He's the first one to admit it. He has a lot of character, determination. He wants to get better. I had a discussion with him about this today. He understands it, and he wants to do what's best for his career.
But you get emergency recalls, so if you said, even if you made the 3 and then you said, hey, we got 2 guys hurt, no one would disbelieve that this year because of all the injuries that you have. All you have to say, another guy hurt, and then say, not a surprise. Do what you got to do. And I'm joking about that, obviously, but it has been that kind of a year. And again, you're not immune to it here, even at the trade deadline. Sean Corrali goes down yesterday, and now you find out there's another one of your main players you're not going to have for probably the remainder of the regular season.
Yeah, and that's the situation we're in right now. We have 12 healthy forwards. We have to have 6 healthy defensemen here, so we have 18 skaters and 2 goalies, 20 men on our roster. So if somebody gets hurt, then we can do the emergency recall without burning one of those 4 recalls, as I talked about.
I got to ask you about the Jonathan Quick situation. Did you know that you were more than likely going to flip that guy again? I mean, did you ever think he was going to be playing here? How did that whole thing play out?
Well, I guess that you never know the interest level from the other teams, but our plan all along was to make sure that Jonathan Quick can go to a playoff team and compete for the Stanley Cup, and he's won 2 of them, and he wants to win a 3rd one, and once we got him, then we got a few phone calls right away and found a deal with Vegas.
And Michael Hutchinson comes this way in that deal. He's here today. He'll back up tonight and for the rest of the year with Elvis Merzlikins. I know you're trying to get a goalie so that you can do that and you can have that flexibility, but what do you like about Michael?
Well, he's got experience. He's played on this level, and we know him, and he's going to be a capable backup for us for the rest of the year here, and we'll see what he can do. Elvis is a clear number 1 right now, and he'll get the most responsibility, obviously, but we still have 5 back-to-backs left, so there's going to be an opportunity for Michael as well.
And that allows you to leave Daniil Tarasov in Cleveland where he needs to play games, right?
Absolutely. We don't need Daniil here opening the door to the bench. He needs to play every game, and that's why he's kept down in Cleveland, and it's important for his development. He's missed a lot of times with injuries too, so it's really important that he stays there and plays.
Opening the door to the bench isn't a bad job.
I knew you were going to say that.
So, anyways,
you hit a soft spot right there, Yarmo.
Especially in the 3rd period, it's critical. Development. I mean, you talk about guys going down. Bob asked you about it. It's pretty clear with Ken Johnson getting big minutes and being on the power play. Marchenko top line. Bernie. I mean, we didn't even expect Bernie to be here. People ask us all the time, are they developing? But the answer is clearly yes. And can you explain to our fans how in tune you are with watching these players and the position they're in each night to make sure that they are on the trajectory or ahead of it even of what you're thinking?
Yeah, the opportunity, first of all, is important that they get the minutes to show, especially in different roles. Ken Johnson's a guy that needs the puck, and if he's playing 8 minutes, he doesn't get the feel for the game like he normally would and what he's used to doing. Kirill Marchenko is the same way. He's an offensive player. He needs to play on the top lines, needs to play power play, and he's had some great success this year. So we're watching him, and you mentioned Tim Bernie. He's been a great pleasant surprise for us. Just came here, plays the same way as he played in Cleveland. Steady and makes a good first pass, and is an NHL level skater, and his defending has been a good, pleasant surprise for us as well. He's not real tall, but he's strong, and he's played very well for us. So it's those are good things, and sometimes these opportunities only open up because of the unfortunate injuries that we've had. But those guys have played well, and it's the opportunity's been well received, well taken by them, and now we have some decisions to make once we get everybody healthy.
I want to ask about Jiricek then, because he's a player we had a glimpse of, but he is taking steps in the American Hockey League, and why is that? Is it because of the opportunity there for him to play a bigger role?
Yeah, he's playing top minutes in the American League. That's a great place for him right now. First year in North America, just 19 years old. Big expectations for him into the future, and there's a good chance he could make our team next year. But this year, I think this is the perfect place for him. We may still see him for a few games up here if the opportunity's right, and he's had a tremendous season, not only in Cleveland but at the World Junior Tournament as well, where he was an All-Star, and that's big stage. That's the top players from that tournament usually become really good NHL players, and Jiricek is going the right way.
I got to ask you this question, with tongue-in-cheek here a little bit, but tell me, could you not petition the National Hockey League today? You saw TSN, I hope, and the fake draft. The Blue Jackets won it. John Davidson's buddies with the commissioner, Gary Bettman. Between the two of you, couldn't we say, hey, it was legit? TSN said they followed the NHL way of doing it.
It's done.
It's done, and we've got Bedard.
Exactly. Now we know what we need to do, and around the whole team, and everything's set. Yeah, well, that'll be an exciting day, that's for sure, and we'll see where we end up with the probabilities.
And that's early May, right?
Yeah.
Yes, after the regular season, yeah.
Yeah, usually, I guess the latter part of the first round is when they usually have that lottery.
Remember.
Yeah, usually have it.
Yeah.
Yep, I can't wait. I'm counting the days.
It'll be more exciting in that room this year, right?
Oh, there'll be a little bit more, couple more butterflies in the stomach.
Smiling in
Make sure you sneak your cell phone in and maybe kind of text us what happens.
You got to give it this one if you get it.
Yeah. I think whether I'll be smiling or not will depend on exactly where we end.
The lottery.
Yeah.
John Klingberg to Minnesota from Anaheim right at the deadline.
I told you
he knew it. Don't worry. The Rimmer knew it. He's dialed in.
Rimmer's rumors.
Yeah. Good job, Rimmer. That's exactly what they are. Yarmo, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Yarmo.
That is going to wrap up the CBJ 30 Trade Deadline Show, brought to you by Ruoff Mortgage. I'd like to thank not only Yarmo Kekalainen, but Jody, Shelley, Jeff Rimmer, also Jeff Svoboda, and Dylan Tyrer, who were all here today. So that is it. The trade deadline is come and gone. The Blue Jackets have made their moves, and now it's on to take on the Seattle Kraken tonight at 7 o'clock at Nationwide Arena. Thanks for joining us today. This has been CBJ 30 Trade Deadline, brought to you by Ruoff Mortgage. So long.